Welcome to Icon and Splash Screen in PySide6 Python. In the next 39 steps, you will learn how to create a PySide6 Python application with both a splash screen and an icon that will appear on the executable file and the Windows title bar. By the end, you'll have a fully functional project packaged into a polished application. Before we start coding, let's make sure you have the right tools installed. Python. Download and install the latest stable version from python.org. PyCharm. Download and install PyCharm Community Edition free or professional if you already have it. Once everything is installed, let's create our project. Open PyCharm. Go to the File menu and click New Project. In the Location field, name the project as PySide Icon Splash. Click on Create. Now that the project is created, let's install the required packages using the PyCharm interface. To begin, we need to open the File menu. Look at the top left corner of the PyCharm window. Click on File to expand the menu. This will give us access to the project settings where we can configure and install everything we need. Select Settings, click on Interpreter under the Python group. Before installing additional packages, it's a good practice to make sure pip, Python's package manager, is up to date. In the Interpreter Settings window, look at the package list. You'll see that pip is already installed. On the right-hand side, notice the upgrade icon, highlighted in yellow. Click this icon to upgrade pip to the latest version. Once the upgrade completes, you'll be ready to install the required libraries for our project. Click on the plus button. To build our application, we'll use PySide6, the official set of Python bindings for the Qt6 framework. Qt is a powerful cross-platform toolkit that allows you to create modern, responsive desktop applications with windows, dialogues, buttons, menus, and much more. With PySide6, we can access all of these features directly from Python. Now let's install it into our project. In the Available Packages window, type PySide6 in the search bar. Select PySide6 from the list of results. At the bottom of the window, click the Install Package button, highlighted in yellow. PyCharm will download and install PySide6 into your project's virtual environment. Once the installation is complete, you'll be ready to start building your GUI. To turn our PySide6 project into a standalone executable, we'll use PyInstaller. This tool bundles your Python application along with its dependencies into a single file that can run on any system without requiring Python to be installed. Here's how to install it. In the Available Packages window, type PyInstaller in the search bar. Select PyInstaller from the list of results. At the bottom of the window, click the Install Package button, highlighted in yellow. With PyInstaller installed, we'll later be able to generate an .exe file that includes both our splash screen and application icon. Click on Close, click OK. Right-click on the project folder, point to New, click on Python File, type main and press Enter. Type the code you will see in the next step of this tutorial. You've just typed several import statements into your main.py file. Let's break down what each of them does. Import OS and import sys. These are built-in Python modules. OS lets your program interact with the operating system, for example, working with file paths. Sys provides access to system-level functions and information, like application arguments and exit codes. From PySide6.QGUI, import QIcon, QPixMap. These come from the PySide6 GUI module. QIcon is used to set the application's icon both in the window and executable. QPixMap is used for handling images, which is how we'll load the splash screen picture. From PySide6.QEditWidgets import. These are the core building blocks of the user interface. QApplication, every PySide6 program needs this to run. It manages the event loop. QMainWindow, a standard main window that can hold menus, toolbars, and widgets. QWidget, the basic container for all other widgets. QVBoxLayout, a vertical layout manager that arranges widgets top to bottom. QLabel, a simple text or image label. QSplashScreen, a special widget that shows a splash screen at application startup. Together, these imports give us everything we need to build the splash screen and the main window for our app. You've just added a function called ResourcePath, and its purpose is to make sure your program can always find the files it needs, such as icons or splash screen images. This is important because the way we access files changes, depending on whether we're running the program inside PyCharm during development or as a packaged executable created by PyInstaller. Inside the function, the program first tries to use something called sys.meipass. This is a special variable that only exists when your application is running as an executable. PyInstaller unpacks all of your files into a temporary folder, and mypass tells the program where that folder is located. If this works, the program can grab resources directly from that unpacked folder. If mypass isn't available, it means the program is running in development mode, so instead of looking in a temporary folder, it just uses the current directory of your project. At the very end, the function combines this base location with the file name you provided and returns the complete path. So, in short, this function acts like a bridge. It makes sure your app can always find its resources, whether you're still coding in PyCharm or running the final executable built with PyInstaller. Here, you've just created a class called MainWindow, which inherits from QMainWindow. This will represent the main window of your application. Every PySide6 app needs some kind of main window or widget, and by using QMainWindow, you get a ready-made framework with support for menus, toolbars, and a central content area. Inside the class, we define the init method. This is the constructor. It's what runs when the window is first created. The very first thing it does is call the parent constructor with super, or init, which sets up all the functionality that QMainWindow already provides. After that, the window title is set with the line self.setWindowTitle Qt splashscreen. This text will appear in the title bar of your application. Next, there's a section for setting the window icon. Here, we use a try block to attempt loading an icon file called pyinstaller splashscreen.ico. The resource path function you wrote earlier is used here to make sure the program can find the icon both in development and after being packaged. If for some reason the file isn't available, the except block simply passes and skips setting the icon, so the program won't crash. Finally, the central content of the window is created. A Q widget is made to act as the container, and a QVBox layout is added so that widgets can be arranged vertically. Into that layout, we place a simple Q label with the text, "Splash Screen now works with PySide6." That layout is then set as the central widget of the window. In other words, this is what the user will see inside the main application window once the splash screen is finished. What you've just written is the entry point of the program. In Python, when we write if gore name = gore main, we're saying only run the following code if this file is being executed directly, not if it's imported into another script. This is a very common pattern in Python applications. Inside this block, the first thing you do is create the application object with appQApplication sys.argv. This line is essential in PySide6 because it sets up the event loop that powers the entire graphical user interface. The sys.argv part allows your program to accept command line arguments if you ever choose to use them. Next, you set the application name with app.setApplicationName Qt splashscreen. This name can appear in some parts of the operating system, such as the task manager or when handling settings. It helps identify your application more clearly. Finally, you set the application's icon with app.setWindowIcon. Here, you're once again using the resource path function to ensure the program can correctly locate the file pyinstaller splashscreen.ico. Just like before, this guarantees that the icon will load properly whether you're running in PyCharm or from a packaged executable. At this point, the basic setup of your application is complete. You now have both a main window class defined and an application object ready to run it. Here, you've started setting up the splash screen for your application. The first step is creating a QPixMap object, which is essentially an image container in PySide6. In this case, you're loading an image file called pyinstaller splashscreen.png, and once again, you're using the resource path function to make sure the program can find the file both during development and after packaging. Next, you create the splash screen itself with qsplashscreen/pix. This takes the image you just loaded and uses it as the background for the splash screen. Then, by calling splash.show, the splash screen is actually displayed on the screen. At this point, when the program runs, the user will immediately see the splash image appear before the main window is loaded. Finally, there's a call to app.processEvents. This is an important detail. It forces the application to process any pending events in the queue right away, making sure the splash screen is drawn and visible immediately. Without this, Sometimes the splash screen might appear late, or even after the main window has already started, which would defeat the purpose of having it. So with these lines, you now have a splash screen that displays instantly as your program launches, giving your application a polished and professional feel right from the start. In this part of the code, you're making sure that the splash screen created by PyInstaller, if it exists, is properly closed. When PyInstaller is used with a splash image, it shows its own loading screen while the application starts up. However, since you've added your own custom splash screen with PySide6, you don't want both to remain visible at the same time. The code starts with a try block. Inside it, you attempt to import the PyI splash module. This is a special helper module that PyInstaller automatically includes whenever you enable its splash screen option. If the import works, you then call PyISplash.close, which tells PyInstaller to hide its splash screen immediately, leaving only your custom splash screen on display. If the program isn't running inside a packaged executable, or if PyInstaller wasn't used with the splash option, then the import will fail. In that case, the accept block is triggered. And the program simply does nothing. This prevents any errors and ensures that your code runs smoothly in both development and packaged environments. So essentially, this piece of code acts as a safeguard. It hands control of the startup experience over to your custom splash screen and avoids having two splash screens appear at once. At this point, your splash screen is already displayed. The next step is to create and show the main window of your application. This is done with the line window equals main window. Here, you're creating an instance of the main window class that you defined earlier, which includes the window title, the icon, and the label inside. Once the window object is created, you call window.show. This makes the main application window visible on the screen. Right after that, there's a call to splash.finish window. What this does is tell Qt to close the splash screen once the main window is ready. In other words, as soon as the application is ready to run, the splash screen disappears smoothly, handing over control to the main interface. Finally, the very last line is systexit app.exec. This is the line that starts the Qt event loop. The event loop is the core of every graphical application. It listens for user actions like clicks, key presses, and window resizing, and then responds appropriately. Wrapping it inside sys.exit ensures that when the application is closed, the program exits cleanly with the right status code. With this final section, your application is now complete. It starts with a splash screen, transitions to the main window, and runs until the user closes it. Right-click on the project folder. Point to New, click on File. At this point, your Python application is ready and working inside PyCharm. The next step is to prepare it so we can bundle it into a standalone executable using PyInstaller. For that, we need a spec file. A spec file is essentially a configuration script that PyInstaller uses to know how to build your application. It defines details like which Python script is the entry point, what resources should be included, and what the output file should look like. By editing this file, you can control things such as adding your icon, including the splash screen, and specifying whether you want a single file executable or multiple files. In this step, you're creating a new file called PySideIconSplash.spec inside your project. To do this in PyCharm, simply type the file name into the Project Explorer and press Enter. Once created, you'll be able to edit it just like a Python script. And later, we'll adjust its contents so PyInstaller knows exactly how to package your app. So think of this step as preparing the blueprint for PyInstaller. The actual building process will come later, but for now, we're just setting up the file that tells PyInstaller what to do. Go to the next step to see what you need to type here. Here, you're looking at the beginning of the PySideIconSplash.spec file. This is the blueprint that PyInstaller will use when creating the executable. At the very top, you can see block cipher equals none. That line is usually just left as is, and it has to do with encryption of the compiled code. For our project, we don't need to worry about it. The most important section here is the analysis block. This is where PyInstaller scans your application and figures out what needs to be bundled. Notice that inside the analysis call, you've listed main.py. That tells PyInstaller that this is the entry point of the program. In other words, the script it should run when the executable starts. Next, pay attention to the datas list. This is where you've explicitly added your resources. PyInstaller splashscreen.ico, the icon for the application.